Hi, this is the DENON DRA-800H. It's a stereo receiver. In the box, you'll get the remote control. Comes with 2 batteries. These are AAA batteries. You can see that when you depress the buttons, it does light up here. So it's got a main and zone 2, which I'll obviously get into when I do the review. The setup guide, safety instructions with FM cable. Power cord, using the kettle type plug. 43.5 centimeters wide. The depth, including the volume knob and the antenna, is 34 centimeters. The height of the table is 15 centimeters. Just having a look at the back, you can see it's got these antennas, your speakers A and B, HDMI out, HDMI in, network, optic, IR in, phono audio in, so for your record player, there with the ground wire over there. Pre-out, so there's your zone if you would like to connect this to a power amplifier and additional speakers. Your audio in, which you can assign, your subwoofer out. You can put your FM antenna over here. If you're someone like me who likes to see exactly what I'm buying, I like to open things up and see what's inside. Right, this is what I see. Here is your input stage. There's the fuse, a little bit of smoothing, and here it goes into the transformer, which is not a toroidal transformer. On the top here, this all looks like your logic control. There's Panasonic chips there, looks like analog devices here. So this is all your analog control. What I do like is these green capacitors are called Mylar capacitors, excellent capacitors for audio circuits. And you can see a lot of circuits over here, which I'm guessing has a few op amps and some other microcontrollers. You see these are some analog connections. And then over here, this is obviously your radio frequency board. You can see there are the antenna wires coming into this RF board. Then this thing over here, this is your main heatsink. Then you've got your transistors with clearly too much silicone paste. And this is the B1560 transistor, which has a maximum power dissipation of 100 watts. And I guess that's where they're getting their 100 watt per channel. But in my world, if the transistor can give 100 watt and you get 100 watt from the transistor, you're pretty much in the saturation zone. So don't count on 100 clean watts. I'm from the generation where if your amplifier can only give you a maximum of 100 watts, you're really only getting 50 watts of a clean signal. This is not a class D. Don't see the specification of the type of class. There's a relay there and some other circuitry. What you're not seeing are 2 fairly large capacitors over there at the bottom. So there's your smoothing capacitors, and they are at 71 volts at 10,000 microfarads. Right, so there's another view. Then obviously the board on the front there, providing you with all the status updates, the infrared receiver for the remote control, obviously a ribbon cable. There's no fan. So you've got a fairly decent heatsink here with thin ribs going across the top. My experience is this does get pretty warm. It does have an eco mode to reduce the power losses, which maybe you might be interested in to have a look at. In terms of the construction, I think it's fairly decent. All right, these do wobble a little bit. As you can see, there's quite a bit of free play. This is not too bad. Reminds me of the old Techniques amplifiers with a big volume knob. And over here, it's got a decent feel. You've got specific resting positions, so you know when you are going from source to source, there's a defined stopping point. It's got a brushed aluminium feel, and overall, I'm happy with the construction of this unit. Right, just going into more detail here, you've got 2 sets of speaker outputs, A and B. The speakers can be heard independently. For example, you can have just speaker set A or just speaker set B, or you can have them both playing at the same time. The impedance of the speakers is 4 to 16 ohms. However, if you have both sets of speakers playing at the same time, it can only handle 8 to 16 ohms. I'll show you how to set the ohms value using a hidden menu. Now the speaker outputs are rated at 100 watts per channel, and if you're running it at 6 ohms, it's rated at 120 watts and 120 watts. You can set these speakers up using bi-wiring, which means you can get the independent signal for the treble and for the bass. You can use the traditional type speaker setup where you put the wire inside there like I've done there, or you can pull out this little cover, and there you can use the normal banana plug for your speaker connections. Now here you can see it says audio in, and there it says assignable. And over here it says HDMI in and also says assignable. If you do not have the audio signal coming through the HDMI at the same time, you can actually tell the AVR to link to a certain audio channel. So that means if you have your cable or satellite and it doesn't have an audio signal coming through the HDMI of just that input, and it's got standalone RCA connections, for example, then you will tell the AVR that channel 1's audio is coming via this path. Maybe it'll be here or here. Maybe you're using a digital audio signal that's coming via there, while the video is coming via the HDMI. According to the manual, if you are going to be using the phono, you should use the ground connection, but it does say that it is not mandatory. If you find that by adding the ground connection, you're getting more hum, then rather try it without the ground connection. You may get less hum. Now over here you have your 5 video inputs. You can see these are all HDMI, and here is your monitor out, and I'll just show you the specifications of the 4K. You can get 4K 60 frames per second. Notice you can also get a pixel depth of 8-bit, 10-bit and 12-bit. Although you will have to set this in the menu because this is enhanced. They recommend that if you are using the enhanced, you will need an HDMI cable that can handle this specification. If you do have a TV that can handle 12-bit, then you will have to go and set that up on your AVR manually and also match that on your TV setup. Right, just looking at the faceplate, you can see that it's got the sticker here, which obviously you can take off. Now, something that is interesting for me is it says 2 times 145 watts. For me, that is a little bit misleading because the specification is actually 2 times 100 watts. So it's actually a 100-watt amplifier if you consider that each channel is 100 watts. Right now, I'm going to show you some of the features and getting your unit up and running. Now, what you'll notice is there's a power button on the bottom left there. If you turn it on, you'll see that it goes green. If this LED over here is flashing red when you power it on or while you're using it, depending on how fast it flashes determines what type of fault it is. 2 protection signals for you. The first one tells you that it has overheated and it flashes red and the unit must be switching off. The other one is flashing red. I think it flashes at a faster rate and it means you have somehow shorted out the speaker connection. So that is a protection mechanism to save the amplifier. Right, now if I switch this off, you can see that it's still a red light there. That is telling me I'm using HDMI pass-through. So I've set it up that it uses that. If your LED stays off, just means that the unit is in standby, but if your TV switches on, it will not switch on the device. The HDMI pass-through allows you to control your device using your TV. So that means that if I come with my TV's remote control and switch on my TV, it will also automatically switch on the AVR. So that's how I know it is set, because the LED is on red when it is in the standby mode. Now, having a look at the features, the first one is this big knob on the right hand side. This is the volume knob. Now you'll notice that it does not have a start and end. As you can see, I can just keep on turning this even though it is at the maximum. Now notice the maximum says 80. You can set that. So that means that you can set a maximum volume, and what is also nice, you can set a turn on volume. For example, let me put it to 80 and now I'll switch it off, and when I switch it back on, you'll see that it will start at the volume that I have set it, which is actually 48. So you can see there, even if you left it at full volume, it will go back to the starting volume, and you can do that for both zones. Now this amplifier has 2 zones, zone 1 and zone 2, so you can set that for both zones, a turn on volume and a maximum volume for both zones. Now you'll have the phones jack over there. When the phones are plugged in, some of the speaker functions are disabled. The next thing is there's a bass knob over here, and you can see you're getting plus and minus 6 decibels, and this also does not have a defined start, and there's your treble, also plus and minus 6 dBs, and then obviously your balance. Now there is your USB. Now, having used this for a while, you'll be happy to know that you can plug in an actual hard drive. As you can see, there is a hard drive, so it can take both NTFS and a FAT file system. Whatever drive you put in here cannot have more than 5,000 files and 8 folder levels. It can play a variety of formats consisting of DSD, FLAC, MPEG-4, WAV, MP3, WMA, and Apple lossless format. Something you will notice if you do put in a fair size hard drive with thousands of songs, it does take a considerable amount of time before it actually categorizes and allows that hard drive to be seen. It does say you can use this as a charging port, and it says 5 volts, 1 amp DC. Now over here, this is your source selection. As you can see, when I scroll through as I turn this, I'm going through all the different types of media inputs. You can see that it continues to go through the options, so it doesn't matter how many times you turn this, it just keeps going round the loop. On the front here, there are buttons. Now the first one says zone 2 on or off, so you can switch on or off zone 2 using a button on the faceplate. You can also do that using the remote control, which I'll show you in a second. Now the source for zone 2, you can see that if I switch zone 2 on, I can now select the source for zone 2. As you can see, I scroll through there like that. Now if you want to control zone 2 from the remote control, it's pretty easy. All you'll need to do is look at the top of the remote. You'll see it says main and zone 2. So I'm going to press zone 2, and the first thing I want to do is switch it off. So there you see how to press zone 2 and off. If you want to switch zone 2 on, you press zone 2 and then you can power it on. Now there are controls here for zone 2. So if I'm pressing the volume, I'm actually now changing zone 2's volume, not zone 1. So if I want to go to the main zone, now when I change the volume, it actually says there. See, it says there M volume, main volume. But you see now if I press zone 2 and I press the volume, it's now controlling the volume for zone 2. So that's showing you can have differing volumes for different zones. Well, you only got 2 zones, main and zone 2. So that allows you to have a different volume in a different room, for example, or if you're using additional speakers and you want some speakers louder than others, you can control that independently. Then you've got your tuner if you want to go through the different radio channels which you've configured. Then you've got your speakers that you can switch them on or off. There's speaker A, just B, A and B. Here it's just the status telling you where you are getting your audio and your video. Right, having a look at the front, you can see you've got these quick select buttons, 1, 2, 3, and 4. These are shortcuts which you can actually reprogram. So at the moment, you can see the default is 1, cable, 2, and so forth. Now, what you can do is you have a look at the remote and you will see that there are also quick select buttons on the remote. So you can reconfigure these to whatever shortcuts you want. I'll quickly show you how to do that. What you do is you turn this to whatever input you want. So let's say TV and audio, and you want that to be your quick select shortcuts. All I do is I'm going to press and hold that now and face it to the unit. And there you can see I've now reconfigured quick select 1 to now be stereo TV. So if I go and I press number 4 over there, it's gone to internet radio. But if I come here with the remote and I press this one, if I press quick select 1 as I've just done, you'll see it'll go to TV and audio. Now something to be aware of, and this is where people can get caught out. Remember that I have pressed the main button. So be very careful when you're using main and zone 2. Always be aware which one you are setting. Right at the bottom here, I've got the speaker selector button. So there you can see I can change the speakers. And then over here, you've got a sleep function. So you can see you can go from 10 minutes all the way up to 120 minutes. Please note that when the sleep times out and the unit goes off, it'll only switch off this unit. It won't switch off the surrounding devices. Now, it is a good idea to download the apps. If you are going to be using this frequently, you'll probably want to use the HEOS app or the AVR remote app. Now, what you'll see is if you use the AVR remote app, you'll need to be able to connect to your unit via Bluetooth. So I've already done that. The procedure is pretty simple. All you'll do is you'll press and hold the Bluetooth button. And at the moment it is paired, so I'll quickly unpair it. And there you can see at the bottom it comes up for pairing. But you need to set the option on the unit to allow it to pair. So all I do is I press the Bluetooth button on the remote control. And there you can see it's trying to connect to the device. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to press and hold the Bluetooth button. Now I've now pressed the Bluetooth button and now I can go back to the phone and now I can select the device for pairing. Right, it is now paired, and because this is using Bluetooth version 4.1, you can also control the device that you've just paired. For example, you can go to next track, you can play, you can pause, you can shuffle, and things like that. Right, so I've now paired my phone and you can see that I can control the volume, and then I can also go to the next song, and it is now streaming via my phone through the amp to the speakers. You can also see the track name coming through onto the display, and there is the device that you are now connected to. You can connect to 8 devices. The Bluetooth works up to 30 meters away, and it also uses the A2DP protocol. Now it is also likely you'll use the HEOS app. So on this app, you can now control all your different platforms that you're using. You can also go to settings, you can go to music sources, and over here you can use a network share. I haven't got this running at the moment. What you're supposed to do on your machine is, let's say a Windows machine, you need to share the folder and then it should come up. You can share the folder and all you'll have to do is put the share over there and possibly a username and password to view those files. This app is also linked to the DVR remote. So for example, there I pressed in the corner and immediately it's going to take me to the sister app. Here it's taking me to the sister app, which you can now control your AVR. So there you can see it's located a AVR, and this is the particular AVR. And now what you can do here is you can also control your AVR. There are the normal settings, which you'll also see on the monitor or your TV, and you can control it from the app. I'm not going to go through all the settings there. I'm just showing you that it's available. And what you can also do is control this from a web browser. Now you can also connect to your AVR using a web browser, but you will need to know the address. Now in this case, I know the address. There you can see the interface. You can now change things from your desk, and there you can see all the settings that you would normally have on the AVR, but here on your computer. If you are going to be using this method of controlling your AVR, I recommend setting your IP address to a static address rather than a DHCP address. What that means is that you set your address manually, because if you use a DHCP, what's going to happen is every time the license expires, it's going to have a new IP address, and you're going to have to go and find that IP address in order to control your AVR. If this doesn't make sense, don't worry, I'll cover it when I show you the setup for the network. Right, so I'm going to show you the monitor now. Right, so there is my screen, call it a TV screen or monitor, whatever you're using. And now what I do is I use the remote and I press the setup button on the side, and there it takes me to the menu. Now the options you've got, and I'm not going to go through all of them, just the key ones. You've got something called Restorer, which is there to assist if the signal was poor. For example, if it was an MP3 with a low bit rate, the Restorer is supposed to make it sound better. Then you've got audio delay. That is if the audio and video are out of sync. For example, sometimes you're watching a movie and the audio is too late or the audio is too early. So you can change that by setting the delay. Obviously the volume, you can set the limits for main zone and also for the zone 2. Zone 2 is set somewhere else. This is just for the main zone. The mute level, that just means when you press the mute button, you can control it that it goes completely off or just reduces the volume somewhat. Right, going to the next section, the video. All right, so you've got the whole HDMI setup. On the new TVs, you should have a feature which allows you to control the AVR from the TV. So that means you only really need to use the TV remote control, because if you switch off the TV, it will switch off the AVR. If you change the volume on the TV, it should then be fed into the AVR and you're actually controlling the AVR. You set that over here. When it says TV switching on, off, so what that means is that you can switch the TV on and off, and then it's asking, what do you want to power off? So you want to power off everything. So the AVR will also power off. Right, moving on. Right, the 4K signal format, if you are going to be using that high bit, then you can set the enhance or you can leave it on standard. And then you've got your TV format. Now you've got the inputs. Here's where you can assign the video as well as the audio. Choose the HDMI, and then you can decide, do you want the audio to come from a different channel? Well, here you do it over here. If you want it to come from the analog inputs, you can set it manually over here. You can do this for all the different inputs. You can rename the sources, you can hide sources if you don't need all the sources, and then you can also set the source level. Maybe that source is coming in at a low value, so you can actually increase the source level, give you a little bit of a volume boost. Now the speaker, you can set the subwoofer, this low pass filter. At the back of the unit, you'll see there's a dedicated output for subwoofer, so you can set that to on off, and then you can set your low pass filter functions. The distance, that's how far you are from the speaker, so it's a kind of a calibration system, and then you can do some levels to do some tests. Now here's the network. Now this is where I said that you'll have to set up either static or dynamic. So if I go to connection, it's asking me, am I going to be using wired or wireless? If you're using wireless, it's not a problem. You can just go through to the Wi-Fi setup, and then all you need to do is find your local SSID, that is the Wi-Fi network you're using, just put the username and password and it will connect to your device. You can't have the Ethernet and the wireless connected at the same time. In this case, I'm using the Ethernet because it's already set up like that, and there you can see it says DHCP, and there's the address. It said 21, and that is why I knew what to put in my web browser. If you want to set this to off, then now you are setting this in a manual mode. That means that if you leave it like this, this AVR will always have the address of number 21. If you're not sure what to put here, your default gateway is your router's address, and your DNS you can also put as your router's address. Network control, this allows you to control the AVR from the network. Now, earlier I showed you using the web browser. If this is off, the web browser won't allow me access or to control the AVR. You can give it a name, and there is the AirPlay settings. Right, moving on. The HEOS account, I'm not going to go into that. Then there's some general settings. Now there is the Zone 2 setup. It's got its own section, and there you've also got the volume limit and the power on volume. Then you can also rename the zone, and then obviously the firmware upgrade. My advice is as soon as you buy the unit, do a firmware upgrade. You can also save your setup to an external device so that if you buy a few of these AVRs and you want to just load the setup for maybe you want to implement these in 10 different houses, you can just load it from the USB. There is something called a setup assistant, which is very useful, and what it does is it steps you through the setup of your speakers, the left speaker, the right speaker, and you go through the setup. I'm not going to do it now, but it is very useful. I've connected USB to the AVR, and you'll see that it does take time to get going, and there, that is the interface. It's a very bland interface. You can see browse folders. There is the music folder, and you can see you're just scrolling up and down with the remote. And if I go to metal and rock, you can see that it'll just give me the list. And what is nice is when you want to play it, it gives you an option. It first says play all. You say you play all. It also gives you the option to play now or to add it into a queue, which I find quite useful. Now there's a button called option. Now this is very important. You can set your tone. There's your bass treble. So that can override the settings that were done on the front faceplate. And then there's a button on the remote called sound mode. Now, for those people who are serious about their sound, I quickly want to show you this. You've got three options: stereo, direct, and pure direct. If you set it to stereo, it plays the audio in the two channels and it allows you to have the bass control, the treble control. If you set it to direct, now you're playing directly from the source, so there's no post-processing that takes place on the audio signal according to the manual. This is the sound that is there at the source. If you set it to pure direct, they claim it makes the sound better. So you can select that by pressing the button over here which says sound mode. So as I press it, you can see it says direct, stereo, and pure direct. Right, in terms of the tuner, you can connect your AM or FM antenna and program your relevant radio stations into the AVR. Now, if you would like to stream from internet radio, you can also do that. And if you want to have a Spotify account, you can connect the unit to your phone, control it via the Spotify app, and the Spotify will actually play via the unit while you're even making calls. So that means you can have continuous music while you're doing your phoning and things like that, and it won't interfere with the sound stream. Now, if you are connecting more than two sets of speakers, or if you are connecting speakers that are 4 ohms or 6 ohms or 16 ohms, I'll quickly show you how you do that. So you press zone 2 and status, and then you'll get into a menu. There you can see it's asking you the video format. Now using the button up, you can see PAL or NTSC. If I press speakers, you can see it says there the 4K standard, then it's the language. Now there is the speaker impedance, and you can change from 4 to 6 to 8 to 16 ohms. Right, now I've just set this up with some old Bose 21, but on my main setup I use Bose 301 as well as Monitor Audio Silver Series, and I've tested this, and now I'll give you my review of this particular amp. First thing is the sound quality is fair. I've got no complaints. One of the things I don't like about it is you need to almost have it at least 60 in order for you to hear this if your room is about 30 square meters. So that means that even though it says it's 100 watts per channel, I'm more inclined to think that is more of a peak measurement rather than an RMS value. And why I say that is my old NAD amp, which is only 40 watts RMS per channel, is about as loud as this 100 watt per channel. So I'm inclined to think that the wattages is a little bit on the exaggerated side. Occasionally when I switch my TV on, this does not switch on. I'm not sure if that's a fault on my TV. I like that this has got the ARC through the HDMI, the audio return. So that means if you've got a smart TV and there would be audio that would be played on your TV from your TV as its own source coming through to the amp, it will then play via the amp to your speakers. Right, so in closing, what do I think of this amp? There is something that really irks me. Now, what irks me is that this amp has pre-out, which is fine, but you actually need a preamplifier if you're going to connect this to another power amplifier. And why I say that is you cannot control the bass or the treble or even the sound mode. Remember the pure direct, with the zone 2. So when it's on zone 1 or the main zone, you can control the sound, and that's fine. For some people, they only need bass and treble. But in my case, I connect this to a power amplifier and I can't control it at all, only the volume. So I just wish they would have allowed the bass and treble to also apply to the preamp out, to the zone 2. So for me, that is a fundamental fail. I now have to go and purchase a standalone preamp just because this amp, which has got so many features, cannot just control the preamp output. Alright, so other than that, the amp is great, the sound is decent. Once again, I do say it's not very loud. I thought it would be louder. I do have a Rotel 200 watt RMS amp, and I also have a NAD, an old NAD, which is 40 watts RMS, and my 40 watts RMS NAD is as loud as this Denon. And when I say loud, I mean with decent sound. So for me, the wattage of this amp is about 50 watts. And I know that is quite a controversial statement because people get quite angry when you say it's not something, even though on the display or on the sticker it said 100 whatever, 40 watts per channel, 125. I think you'll be able to squeeze out 50 watts of decent sound while you're listening to music for a good 25-30 minutes. It does get pretty warm when you push this amp. Alright, so that's my end of my review, and thanks for listening, and cheers.